A spring morning, forever etched in my memory. The sound of rain tapping against the window, blending with the warm scent of cinnamon pancakes my dad was making in the kitchen. I still remember him standing there, in front of the stove, wearing his blue and white striped apron, humming a cheerful tune. "Holly, come help your old man flip these masterpieces," he called out, raising a wooden spoon like a magic wand. I giggled and ran toward him, but just then everything shattered. The spoon clattered to the floor and my dad staggered, clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain. And in that one moment my world changed forever. I was only 5 years old when my father passed away from a heart attack. That day I was too young to understand everything, but the flashing ambulance lights, the blaring sirens, and the sterile hallways of the hospital are burned into my mind. My mother collapsed onto the hospital floor, tears streaming down her face, gripping my father's hand even though he could no longer hold hers. I remember standing there, clutching my favorite rag doll, feeling empty and lost among a sea of strangers. My father was gone, and our house became eerily quiet. At first, my mother still held me in her arms every night, telling me bedtime stories as if trying to fill the void my father had left behind. But as time passed, she began to change. Family dinners became rare, she worked later hours, and the kitchen, once filled with my father's laughter, grew cold and silent. She no longer made pancakes on Sunday mornings. She no longer laughed as much as she used to. Then one day she told me she had met someone new. "Holly, do you remember Mr. David?" she asked, her voice gentle but uncertain. Of course I remembered him. He was a tall man with kind blue eyes and a warm smile, someone I had seen at community gatherings. "Your mom and I are getting married," she said, as if it were just a simple change in our lives. But to me, it was a shock. She remarried less than a year after my father's death. I remember her wedding day, the house filled with white flowers and the overpowering scent of perfume. Everyone was happy, celebrating that my mother had found love again. But I felt like an outsider. I stood there in the floral dress my mother had picked out for me, but inside all I felt was cold. My father hadn't been gone that long, and now another man had taken his place at our dinner table. David tried to be a good father to me. He bought me a new bicycle for Christmas, taught me how to throw a ball in the backyard, even helped me with my homework. But I couldn't accept him. I knew it wasn't his fault, but every time I saw him sitting in my father's chair, I wanted to run away. When I was 7, my mother got pregnant. The whole house was thrilled, but I didn't know how to feel. "You're going to have a baby brother, Holly. You'll be a big sister. How exciting is that?" my mother said, her hand resting on her belly. I nodded, but inside I felt nothing. After my brother Ryan was born, everything changed completely. If I had even a little bit of my mother's attention before, now it was gone entirely. "I have to take care of Ryan, sweetheart," she would say whenever I tried to get her attention. "Your brother needs me more right now." I wanted to say what I was thinking, that I needed her too, that I was still just a child. David noticed it. I saw him watching my mother with concern as she overlooked me amidst the chaos of taking care of Ryan. He tried to fill the void she left behind, driving me to school, attending my piano recitals, even making Sunday morning pancakes himself, though his pancakes never quite tasted as good as my father's. But no matter how hard David tried, I still felt like a shadow in my own home. I had lost my father, and now I was slowly losing my mother too. I started to notice the shift in our family when Ryan turned 3. That was the first time I realized without a doubt that I was no longer an important part of my mother's world. At first I tried everything to regain her attention. I helped her clean the house, neatly arranged Ryan's toys, and even learned to make my own breakfast so she wouldn't have to worry about me. But no matter what I did, all she cared about was Ryan. Family meals became a strange ritual where I felt like an outsider. If I talked about my day at school, my mother would nod absent-mindedly. But if Ryan babbled nonsense, she would burst into laughter, showering him with praise as if he had just performed a miracle. "Did you hear that, Holly? Ryan just said Mema. Oh, my sweet, brilliant boy." I looked at Ryan, watching as he smeared mashed potatoes all over his fingers. I didn't understand what was so amazing about it. As Ryan grew older, the favoritism became undeniable. If I forgot to wash the dishes after dinner, my mother would remind me immediately, but if Ryan spilled an entire glass of orange juice on the table, she would simply pat his head and say in a soft voice, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy will clean it up." If I scored high on a test, she would barely acknowledge it. but if Ryan scribbled some messy drawing, she would proudly stick it to the refrigerator as if it were a masterpiece. David saw it too. At first he didn't say anything, maybe to avoid conflict with my mother, but I noticed the way he quietly observed, the occasional furrow of his brows when she dismissed my achievements in favor of celebrating something meaningless Ryan had done. By the time Ryan was 6, things had gotten worse. He had started acting out, selfish, demanding, but my mother indulged him without question. Once, I caught Ryan sneaking $5 from my mother's purse to buy candy. When I told her, she simply laughed. "He's just a curious little boy," she said lightly. "It's nothing serious." But I knew that if I had done the same thing at his age, she would have punished me harshly. That was when David started stepping in. I remember one evening when Ryan refused to clean his room. My mother just shook her head and chuckled. "He's still little. I'll do it tomorrow." But David disagreed. "Sarah, Holly was that little once too. But you never did everything for her," he said, his voice filled with quiet frustration. "You don't understand," my mother snapped, crossing her arms. "Ryan is more sensitive than Holly. He needs me more." "Sensitive?" David raised an eyebrow. "Or is he just being spoiled?" I watched them argue, a growing discomfort settling in my chest. I didn't want David to fight with my mother because of me, but I couldn't deny that he was the only one in the house who saw how unfair this was. When I turned 17, David called me into his office. "Holly, I know you've been through a lot," he said, placing a thick envelope on the desk. "I've been saving money for your college. You can go anywhere you want." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew David cared about me, but I never expected that he had been quietly preparing an escape route for me. "What about Mom? Does she know?" I asked. David was silent for a long moment before answering. "She doesn't agree. She wanted this money to be saved for Ryan instead. But this is my money, and I want you to have a chance to build a future for yourself." Gratitude swelled in my chest. I had made my decision. I was leaving. When I left for college, my mother didn't come to see me off. "Ryan isn't feeling well," she said curtly over the phone. Only David drove me to my dorm, helped me set up my things, and gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder before leaving. "Live your life, Holly," he said. College was a breath of fresh air, a place where I no longer had to compete with Ryan for attention. I slowly let go of the cold family dinners, the feeling of being forgotten, and my mother's blatant favoritism. I threw myself into my studies, seized every opportunity, and eventually landed a job at a major financial firm after graduation. But while I was moving forward, Ryan was falling apart. David kept me updated, telling me that Ryan had dropped out of school and spent his days playing video games, with no plans for the future. My mother continued to enable him just as she always had. Then, one day, I received a call I never wanted to get. David had passed away. A sudden heart attack at the construction site. By the time I arrived at the hospital, he was gone. I remember standing in the hallway, feeling like history had repeated itself. Another father figure, another heart attack, another funeral. At the service, my mother played the role of the grieving widow, crying dramatically for all to see. Ryan stood in a corner, expressionless, his eyes glued to his phone throughout the ceremony. I looked at them both, and felt nothing but detachment. Later I learned that my mother wasted no time selling David's car, then gradually selling off his tools and equipment. She used the money to continue supporting herself and Ryan. I wanted to believe that one day she would finally realize Ryan needed to stand on his own, that she couldn't keep treating him like a child forever. But deep down I knew that day would never come. And for the first time in my life I wondered, would there come a day when she drained me dry, the same way she did to David? On a Tuesday evening, as I sat on the sofa after a long day at work, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. "Mom." It had been a long time since she last called me. My hand hesitated for a moment before I pressed the answer button. "Holly, I need you to come home, please." Her voice was small and shaky, completely different from her usual calls. Calls that were always about Ryan, about how he was trying but never actually accomplishing anything. I took a deep breath. "What's wrong?" There was a long silence before she finally whispered, "We're running out of money." Even though I had expected it, hearing her say it still made my chest feel heavy. It had been 3 years since David passed, and I knew my mother had been living off his savings, but now, even that was gone. "Where's Ryan? He's not helping at all?" I asked bluntly. A brief hesitation. "Ryan is looking for a job, you know that." I closed my eyes, feeling frustration bubble up inside me. Looking for a job? That same excuse had been repeated for almost 10 years, but instead of arguing, I simply said, "All right, I'll come." I drove home on Saturday morning, feeling an odd sense of detachment as I pulled up to the house I had grown up in. The front lawn was overgrown. The once white-painted walls had turned yellowish with age. I wondered what my mother had been doing all these years if she wasn't even taking care of her own home. When she opened the door, I immediately noticed how much she had changed. Her face was gaunt, her graying hair was unkempt, and her eyes were sunken from exhaustion. She looked like she had aged 10 years in just a few. "Come in, sweetheart," she said, her voice weary. I stepped into the living room, unsurprised to find Ryan sitting on the couch, eyes glued to the TV. He looked exactly the same as the last time I saw him, still in wrinkled clothes, still with that same lazy posture. "Hey," he mumbled without even looking at me. I didn't bother responding. Mom sat down across from me, clasping her hands together. "Holly, I really have no money left. Everything, electricity, water, the house insurance, it's all too expensive. I can't manage it on my own." I folded my arms and stared at her. "I don't understand. What happened to the money David left you?" My mother avoided my gaze. "I had to use it to keep us afloat. Ryan needed food, gas money, clothes." I clenched my fists. Of course. It was always about Ryan. "So what do you want now?" She let out a deep sigh, then spoke with a hopeful tone. "If you could send me $1,500 a month, just to help a little." I froze. $1,500? That was not a small amount, not just a little. But looking at her now, frail and desperate, I couldn't bring myself to say no outright. I swallowed the lump of frustration in my throat. "Fine. I'll send it." My mother nearly burst into tears of relief. "Thank you, Holly. You're such a good daughter." I didn't respond. 3 months later, I started noticing something. Nothing about my mother's life had actually improved. Every month, $1,500 disappeared from my account. But every time I visited, she was still complaining about bills, the lawn was still overgrown, the roof was still leaking, and Ryan was still sitting on the couch doing absolutely nothing. One afternoon, when I stopped by unannounced, I found a stranger sitting in the living room. She was wearing a tight short dress, her nails painted a bright red, holding a can of soda while scrolling through her phone. "Who is this?" I asked. Ryan peeked his head out from the kitchen. "Oh, that's Ashley, my girlfriend." I turned to my mother, waiting for some kind of reaction, but she simply smiled. "Ashley has been staying with us for a while now. She's been really good for Ryan." I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. My money was supporting 2 freeloaders now? But the worst part was yet to come. A week later, when I returned home, I found a stack of documents on my mother's desk. When I opened them, I went numb. This was a will. And in it clearly stated that my mother was leaving everything, including the house, to Ryan. I gripped the paper tightly, feeling the blood rush to my head. I was the one helping her, the one sending money every month, and yet everything still belonged to Ryan? "Mom." I stepped forward and placed the will on the table. "Explain this to me." She flinched slightly when she saw what I was holding, but then she let out a sigh, as if this were nothing of importance. "Holly, you have to understand, Ryan needs this house. He has nothing. You're already stable." I let out a bitter laugh. "Nothing? Ryan has nothing because you've given him everything. And me? I'm the one sending you money every month. I'm the one taking care of you. You're being selfish, Holly. You don't need this house." Her voice was cold. I clenched my teeth. For the first time in my life, I saw it clearly. My mother never truly saw me as her child. Ryan would always be her priority, no matter what he did. And no matter how hard I tried, I would always just be a shadow in her eyes. I looked at her, searching for even a flicker of regret, but all I saw was indifference. No hesitation, no guilt. Just an unsettling sense of calm. "Ryan needs this house. He has nothing. You're already stable." Every word felt like a knife to my chest. For years, I had convinced myself that no matter how much my mother favored Ryan, deep down she still loved me. But at that moment, I realized the truth. I never stood a chance. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the anger boiling inside me. "Then explain something to me, Mom. Why am I the only one sending money every month? I emphasized each word. She shrugged. Because you can help and Ryan can't. That's what a good sister does. A good sister. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. No, Mom. A good sister doesn't have to sacrifice her entire life for a lazy, entitled man who refuses to take care of himself. A good sister also deserves respect. She folded her arms and frowned. You're being selfish. All you ever think about is yourself. Ryan is your brother. You're supposed to help him. What about me? I wanted to scream. I had spent my entire life helping, trying my best, sending money nonstop, knowing it would never be enough to earn my mother's approval. I clenched my fists, a deep ache spreading through my chest. Did you ever love me, Mom? She blinked, then sighed as if I had just asked the most ridiculous question. Holly, don't be childish. Of course I love you, but Ryan is special. Special. A simple word, yet it held the weight of my entire existence. I didn't need to hear anything else. I stood up, my expression cold. You won't be getting another cent from me. My mother looked stunned, then let out a mocking laugh. Don't be ridiculous, Holly. You're not going to let your mother and Ryan starve. I stared straight into her eyes. Try me. Then I turned and walked away, without looking back. 3 days later, I logged into my bank account, went to the recurring transfers section and hit cancel. It took only a single tap, yet I knew this was the biggest turning point of my life. Almost immediately, my phone started buzzing with missed calls from my mother. When I didn't answer, the messages began flooding in. Holly, I can't believe you would do this to your own family. You're making life miserable for us. Ryan is really worried too. Do you even know how much we're struggling? The bills are unpaid. Are you really going to let your mother and brother starve? For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I turned off my message notifications. A week later, when I still hadn't responded, my mother changed tactics. Ryan texted me. You're destroying this family. You're heartless. Look at Mom. She's completely worn out because of you. Remember when we were kids and you said you'd always protect me? Was that just an empty promise? I replied with a single line. Need money? Get a job. Then I blocked his number. 3 months later, I started to feel truly free. With no more $1,500 deductions from my account each month, I finally began investing in my own future. I opened a savings account, started planning to buy a small apartment of my own. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. I no longer woke up in the middle of the night worrying about my mother and Ryan. I no longer had to endure guilt-tripping calls or unreasonable demands. I had escaped the shadow of favoritism and manipulation. 6 months later, I was driving through downtown when I saw a help-wanted sign hanging in a restaurant window. Now hiring, no experience needed, just hard work. I thought about Ryan. A part of me wanted to stop, take a picture of the sign and send it to him. But then, I just smiled and kept driving. Because now I was truly free. Some relationships, even those bound by family ties, exist only through manipulation and selfishness. Holly's story is not just a personal one. It's a reminder that no one is obligated to sacrifice their entire life for people who refuse to stand on their own feet. Sometimes the hardest choice, walking away, cutting ties, is the only way to find true freedom. Life should not be weighed down by burdens that don't belong to us. And Holly made the right choice, to live for herself. What do you think about Holly's story? Did she make the right decision by cutting ties with her family? Or should she have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.